Can't hear you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hope you can all hear me. If you can't, then please just put it in the chat. My name is Nick Caton. If you don't know me, I am the chairperson for the Alliance for Finance, and we are here today to discuss socio-economic diversity in the finance sector. If you have any questions as we go through, or any points that you'd like to make, then please use the chat function. My colleague Kevin will be looking after that, and we can put those to the speakers as we go through. So socio-economic diversity, so what do we mean by that? So basically it's a term that we use to I guess
Sorry,
describe
Nick,
people.
I'm going to interrupt. I don't know if it's just me, but I can't see you. Hear you perfectly.
Guys, can you see me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think it's just you, Kevin.
It's just me,
You need to go to high ground.
I can't see the slides anymore that you were sharing.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
I've taken those away. So yeah, what we're talking about is people from, I guess, a particular social class or financial situation, which impacts on perception, whether that's because of someone's family, their education, social interactions, what car they drive. All of these are often too often factors which are being used to influence decisions about promotion or hiring or anything like that, which limits opportunities for those from different backgrounds. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I think too often we talk about the 9 protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010, and we don't necessarily think about socioeconomic diversity. And there may well be crossover, I think absolutely is. But, you know, when we are looking at diversity, I think what we should be looking at is, rather than just what the law says, actually what we should be doing as a society and as a sector. And particularly in the finance sector, which perhaps there is some kind of misconception that it's only open to those from a wealthy or privileged background. And I think, you know, we need to be looking at how to influence our organisations to look further afield for a more diverse talent pool and get a better range of perspectives, as with all kinds of diversity. So in order to try and tackle, or I guess shine a light on some of these, we're going to be joined today by a few speakers with some very good experience in this field. We have Tracy Garrett, CEO designate of Viva Canada and non-executive director of the London Stock Exchange, to give her view as one of the board of directors of Progress Together. She'll introduce what that means. And we're also being joined by Joe White and Prince Zundlov. Thank you very much for joining us from the Nationwide to talk about their experiences and the work that's being done there as well. So without further ado, I will shut up and I'll pass over Tracy. Can you introduce yourself? And
Muted. I'll ask you when to put the slides up in a minute, Nick, so I'll just say a few words of introduction first. So thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about Progress Together today. As Nick said, I'm Tracy Garrett. I am about to embark upon my 4th CEO role in financial services, and to head off to Toronto later in October to pick up that role. I've spent 25 years in and around financial services, but I come from very humble beginnings, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Let me just say a few words about Progress Together, first of all. So Progress Together is a not-for-profit membership organisation which really focuses on boosting socioeconomic diversity at senior levels in financial services. It's a peer-to-peer network which was launched just over a year ago, and we're already representing more than 30% of the UK financial services sector, and we're growing all the time. And really, our aim as a body, we were formed out of the City of London's task force on socio-economic diversity, but our reason for being is to create a UK financial services sector where career progression is led by your job performance and not by you know, the characteristics as Nick just referenced. And it was really born out of some research that was done back in 2020, where the Bridge Group looked at 8 financial services companies, and the data suggested that 89% of senior leaders, and by that we mean C-suite and 1 level below, 89% of those senior leaders were from a higher socioeconomic background, compared with just 47% at more junior levels in the organisation. So employers are working hard, obviously, to diversify their junior talent, but employees from working class backgrounds are progressing 25% slower. And that was the reason for the creation of Progress Together. So maybe, Nick, if you can put the slides up, the first slide. I'm going to just whistle you through a few data points, and then I'm really happy to take some questions. So I'm just going to whistle through, you know, why this is important, what the barriers are to progression, and the data suggests that we don't actually have we no longer have an access problem in terms of socioeconomic mix in the workplace. Apprenticeships have been doing a brilliant job of getting people in, but it's then about getting people on. So I'll talk about some of those barriers. I'll tell you a bit about my story, and it might not be what you think. I'm then going to talk a little bit about what good looks like in this space and some of the actions that we think work. And then I'll talk a little bit about data. So next slide, please. I sound like Chris Whitty, don't I? Next slide, please. So UK financial services employers, they're simply not progressing talent from all backgrounds. And we all know that with the highest rate of employment in the UK for a very long time, the war for talent is red hot. And I want you to pay attention to that 89% figure there. And I just want to reiterate it. In the study, it showed across these 8 financial services organisations that in the top 2 layers, 89% of those people were from a higher socioeconomic background, when at the junior levels of the organisation, that figure was 45%. And you can see that this doesn't really compare favourably with the rest of the economy. If you look at the range of other sectors in the UK and you look at the socioeconomic mix at senior levels, you will probably see a range of 37 to 45% of the C-suite leaders being from a higher socioeconomic group. So other sectors are getting this right. Financial services is not. And when we talk about socioeconomic background, we're using one key question, which is this one in the dark box on the right. It's the question around parental age, occupation at age 14. And we use that one because a lot of financial services companies are global. UK are subsidiaries of big global firms sometimes, and it's therefore an internationally comparable data point. There are lots of other questions, but this is the one that the Social Mobility Commission reckon is the best one, and it's the one we use. So you can go on to the next slide. So we have just published, as Progress Together, our first data report since the membership body was founded. We launched it last week. It's available on the website, and I'm sure that we can provide a link to that. It's the biggest data set of its kind internationally. So it now spans 24 data reporting organisations in the UK, and it covers 149,111 employees in those companies. So biggest data set of its kind. And the key findings are the other bullet points here. So socioeconomic background is definitely more likely in financial services to impact a person's route to success than either gender or ethnicity. Women are particularly affected. There's a double dampening of their success prospects and a double disadvantage, with women from working class backgrounds progressing over 20% more slowly than their peers from more advantaged families. White men in particular from higher socio-economic backgrounds are 30 times more likely to be successful in financial services than a working class ethnic minority woman. So you can see the intersectionality that is here. And therefore, the really good news is, if you crack it, the socio-economic diversity, it helps with all those other characteristics as well. 20% of senior leaders in financial services in our data set attended an independent school, but we know that nationally, less than 7% of the whole population did. So that's a whopping 3 times, triple the national average. So something is going amiss here. And then half of all senior roles in the sector are held by white people from a higher socioeconomic background. That figure in and of itself shows that we do have to do something different, because we are a multicultural society and we need to crack it. Next slide, please. So all of this data is showing that we have a persisting problem, despite the fact that there's a really positive business case for greater diversity in the workplace generally, and specifically for greater socio-economic diversity. And you can see just here in the box on the right, the class pay gap that opens up in the tech sector. In the tech sector, the class pay gap between people at the more senior levels who have achieved that status and the next level down is £5,000. In financial services, that pay gap is estimated to be £17,500. Now, over the course of a career, that's really significant to those people's financial prospects and well-being, and it's really important for the tax take by the Treasury as well. There's a real missed opportunity there. So you can see that the financial case is absolutely there, and these slides will be available for you to have a bit more of a look at that data. Next slide, please. And as I said, we know that socioeconomic background is impacting other diversity strands. There's a definite case around the intersectionality here. And all of those figures there, you can see the different mix of intersectional characteristics and the impact that they have. So what are the barriers? Why are we stuck in this rut, seemingly? If you can go to the next slide. Our data suggests that there are a few elements that are contributing. The first one at the top there is networks, and it's a little bit default human behavior. People recruit in their own likeness. They gravitate towards people like them. And therefore, when they're hiring, and this is particularly prevalent at senior levels, they recruit people like them. They recruit people who look like them. They recruit people who sound like them. They recruit people who have the same life experiences as them. And so this is a problem, because if you don't look or sound like them, and you can't talk about your university gap year or your ski trips or which university you went to and had a brilliant time, then you're not going to fit in, and you're probably not going to get that tap on the shoulder. So networks continue to be a problem. Perceptions of talent also can be affected by the way that you sound, by your accent, by the clothes that you wear, by the bag that you carry. These things are all still playing a role, and they shouldn't be. And people, even going through graduate schemes or apprenticeship schemes, find that they don't feel like they fit in because of all those things. Sponsor access is a real problem. And these unwritten codes of what you have to be like and sound like and look like to fit in around here, they're all still prevalent. And then finally, the roots up. As I said, we don't really have a problem in financial services around entry-level access, but we do have a problem of progression. And that's because the roots up and the progression routes are opaque. There isn't clear criteria. And often there isn't an independent or calibration role being played in who is succeeding and who is being picked. Now, these things are all addressable, And Progress Together has a brilliant toolkit for all the stages of your hiring and your progression and your data reporting that we can help you with. So they're all able to be overcome if you're methodical about it and you give it attention. Next slide, please. So let me talk a bit about my story. And yes, that cute little face on the left is me when I was 5 years old. It was my first day at school. And so I come from Blackpool in Lancashire. I grew up in my early years in one of the roughest council estates in Blackpool. It has some of the worst drug and alcohol abuse problems. It's one of the largest council estates, actually, in terms of the number of houses and people that live there, highest teenage pregnancy rate. So I definitely, have not followed a traditional route. More than that, I had to leave school at 17 to look after my younger siblings when my mother died. And we were, unfortunately, by that stage, a one-parent family. So I left school really with no qualifications to speak of at all. I spent 2 years looking after my younger siblings, or trying to, before I realised that however much I wanted to do it, I wasn't cut out for the job and I wasn't ready. And so I had to give up on that. I had to let my siblings go and live with other members of the family. And then I had to find a job because I had to support myself. And I had the sheer good fortune to go and work in a very basic entry-level customer services job for a home interiors company called Dolphin Bathrooms. And the lady that I went to work for went on to change my life, because within about 3 weeks, she spotted a spark of something in me, asked me why I wasn't at university. And I'm not quite sure how and why I felt that I could trust her, but I did. And I told her my story, and she put herself out for me. She approached the company and asked them, would they sponsor me to go and do my HNC in finance, business and finance studies. They gave me an afternoon off work a week, and I did 2 evenings a week. And I spent 2 years studying for that qualification. And with that, my confidence grew, and I reached out and asked for new opportunities. And within 6 months, I had my first management position. Now, I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but what I will say to you is that there are a couple of themes. One is being willing to look past the qualifications that somebody does or doesn't have, and to see the energy and the drive and the tenacity that they bring to the table. The second is that I was so loyal to that organisation because they'd taken a risk on me and they'd made an investment in me, and the discretionary effort that I gave back was immense. So there's a real win-win here. And actually, that's why I try to give back now as well. Throughout my whole career since, I've championed the cause. I will be honest with you that it took me a long time to be willing to tell my story, though. And I think there's an important lesson here. So I started work, as I say, when I was 19. It took me until 2013. So that would be when I was 43. To tell my story and to be honest about my background. I never lied, but nobody ever asked me. Eventually in 2013, a mentor persuaded me that it could be inspiring to others to tell my story. And so I did. And I never regretted it, because the outpouring of comments from people who were in basic customer services jobs, just like I'd had, and now could see that it was possible to achieve something much greater, was so worthwhile. But I do know that there are more people like me in financial services at senior levels, but I also know from talking to some of them personally, they are reticent about telling their story and being honest about who they are. They feel exposed. Some of them may never have talked about it for 20 years, and they then feel concerned about whether people will feel they've been dishonest in those 20 years in never saying, saying who they truly are. And I would say to anybody in that situation, don't overthink it. There are far more upsides to being honest about it, and it will be far more engaging than keeping that secret a little bit longer. So definitely do tell your story if you have a story to tell, and be curious with other colleagues about their background, particularly if you see them sitting quietly when you're having a conversation about gap years, ski trips, or fancy exotic holidays. So I'm really happy to take any questions on all of that. I want to give one more slide, next slide please, which is just a little bit about what does good look like and how can you overcome those barriers. As I said, there's a massive toolkit. If your organisation is not already involved in and talking to Progress Together, please get in touch with them. But there are 5 things on the screen here that I would say will really make the difference. The first is leadership accountability, assigning clear accountability for taking action, making it part of the performance criteria of senior leadership is definitely key to unlocking this. The second is assessing where you are now, collecting data on socio-economic background as soon as possible. And you do have to go through some hoops of data protection, but also ensuring psychological safety of people who are going to report that data. But all of that can be overcome. And again, the toolkit is massively helpful. Set goals in your organisation, baseline your starting point, look at where you would like to be and what other companies like you are doing. And again, our latest data report will show you some of that benchmarking. Take action when you've identified how close or how far away from your targets you are. Take meaningful action and hold people accountable, and then publish, present your data. We found it massively engaging amongst our workforce that people were really interested to know that this was important to us and that we wanted everybody to genuinely have a good opportunity to succeed. So I'm conscious I've gone on a bit. There are a couple of other slides in the pack, which I'm really happy for you to circulate, Nick, which do show who our member organisations, who our founding partners are, and a little bit about why to collect data. But I'll pause there in the interest of giving some opportunity for questions.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Tracy. And yes, if anyone has questions, then please pop them in the chat box. We'll come to that in a second. I do know that we have a few member organisations who are joining us today, and I believe actually Santander were one of your founding members as well.
Right. Yeah.
And they're affiliated with us as well. And for everyone, if you didn't know, the Alliance Finance is also a supporter of Progress Together. So we obviously do what we can to make sure that that this work is, pushed upon, and those conversations are happening with your organisations as well about what they are doing. I think as union reps and members, etc., we obviously do a lot of work in the equality, diversity and inclusion field, but sometimes perhaps this is kind of overlooked maybe a little. So I mean, can I ask a question? I think I picked up on one thing that you were talking about around the I guess progressing through the organizations and how perhaps that can be based on things such as education, etc. And one thing that I've always wondered, I just get your viewpoint on, do you think there's too much of a focus on kind of skills in the finance sector rather than behaviors, if you like, too much about what piece of paper you've got or how good you are on Excel, rather than actually those things that perhaps are a little bit more difficult to teach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's improving with the approaches at entry level to apprenticeships and get into customer service and those sorts of schemes. I think they've been brilliant for that, because they do they don't ask for a bit of paper often. What they will do is a literacy and mathematics kind of basic test as part of the onboarding and the interview and selection. One of the issues, as I said, is that entry-level access, we don't really have such a problem, but what we do have is with progression. And what we also know is that at senior level in financial services, 75% of the more senior roles when they are appointed are external hires. So there's an external recruitment process, and by default, almost, that the parameters that they set with the search firm will say degree, university degree. Now, I can't remember, I'm 53. I can't remember the last time that somebody actually really asked me about my educational qualification, because of the experience that I've attained over all those years. So why the hell do we ask the search firm to only look for people who've got a degree? So I do think, and we are, as Progress Together, we're engaging with search firms to help them understand how they can help firms to do this differently. So one of the calls to action I would absolutely have is to challenge with the HR teams, particularly around executive hires and senior hires and those progression points. What parameters do you really need to set for a great candidate for this job? And probably a university degree isn't one of them. So I do think, yeah, certainly that there's an opportunity to think a little bit differently about what ticks we need in boxes to qualify for the role.
Right, yeah, thank you. Kevin, is there anything else that's come through?
There's nothing through on the chat at the moment, but can I take advantage as well, Nick? Because Tracy's touched on one of the areas we in AFF, in our Executive Council Committee, continually come across when talking about equality, diversity and inclusion. It looks like you've cracked it as well. So I want the answer, please. You were talking there about assessing the information in the strategy to improve things. And you said collect data of socioeconomic background. We were talking recently about the difficulties in collecting data on, say, it was disability, I think was the actual topic we were talking about just that time, but it spread into the whole EDI sort of agenda. I really love what you said about ensuring the safety, and it's sort of very interested on how you message that safety, how you collect the data, and because that is essential to moving forward and knowing where you're going.
Yeah, so there's a whole toolkit around this that's available on the Progress Together website, I think, and certainly available to members. And there are some webinars as well that you can watch. I think they're available on demand. But I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, you know, the data privacy officers in any organisation are clearly all over this from the outset. And so our toolkit has been developed with the best advice from data privacy lawyers to ensure that that isn't a cost, particularly that smaller organisations, you know, won't prioritise or can't bear. So, so it's been well informed by data privacy lawyers, and the toolkit will tell you about the ways in which you can anonymise that data, the ways in which you can make it available only to certain individuals who are responsible for the analysis. So there's a whole range of stuff there. The most important thing, I think, is to be very clear in your communication with your staff about the ways in which the data will be used and the ways in which it definitely won't. And we talked about two key principles, one being it will only be used in aggregate form. So it's anonymised, it will be used in aggregate form to look at trends. It will be connected, but in an anonymous way, to data on progression, and it will never, ever be used as an informant or background data on somebody in relation to their individual situation regarding progression, promotion, performance, pay, any of those things. It's never visible to your line manager or even up your reporting line. It's to a very small number of people generally in a HR analytics function or in a legal and DPO department. So again, there's a massive toolkit there. I can't possibly do justice to the topic in a few short minutes, but it is possible to overcome that. At AXA, which was in my last role, we took 15 months from when we launched our data collection campaign to being at 67% of people having disclosed their data. Now, I've known organisations that have taken 3, 4, 5 years to get to that point. So all the principles that we followed are absolutely mirrored in the toolkit. So there's help out there.
Okay, and so I assume that it wasn't a mandatory process, it was voluntary, and you were able to achieve 67%. That is impressive.
Yes. Yeah, we definitely, the advice from the data protection people was you definitely could not make it mandatory. And actually, it's an engagement exercise. It's really important that you tell people why you want to do it. And one of the first things that we identified actually from our data collection was that 43% of our staff, when they filled in the survey, or disclose their data, we found 43% of our workforce declared that they had a caring responsibility. Our immediate reaction within 6 weeks was to get a carers network up and running. So it was using the data, putting it into action straight away with services that were of benefit to such a big swathe of the population. So getting scores on the doors with early wins of how you're using the data for the betterment of the staff, absolutely the key to unlocking more engagement.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Nick, I do have another, but I'm conscious of time. So shall I come back later if we have time?
I think we've got some time, Kevin. No, that's fine.
The other one was, Tracy, what you said about the progression routes being opaque. I just totally agree with you. You know, where you can measure it, where you can see it, where you can go out to recruiters, you can make changes and you can alter things. But those opaque ones, the ones you can't see, the stuff that filters around all over the place. And you won my heart when you talked about HNC, because yeah, I took that route too. What would you say more about how you remove that opaqueness, how you shine a light on it, bring it out of the shadows, remove what's not helpful to the organisation or the people?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I think removing the opaqueness, having a published policy or guide around what it takes to attain a promotion, right? So if you're moving from, associate to your first kind of leadership role, what is it that you need to demonstrate to get there? What is the experience? What are the behaviours? What are the things? What are the ticks in the boxes? And have it written down somewhere so that when your manager is dilly-dallying and stalling and telling you all the reasons why you're not ready yet, you've got a checklist, So there's definitely something about publishing what good looks like to attain that thing. Also, similarly for performance criteria, being really clear. And I always say that any performance management conversation is a dual-owned conversation between the employee and their line manager. So you can't expect your line manager to do all the work, but you've got to be asking the questions. What does good look like? What will my performance criteria be? And then I think the third bit is having some independence in I'm going to use the dreaded word, calibration processes. Having independence, either HR acting as an independent arbiter and pulling people up when they start to talk about the things that are not in the criteria, the way somebody looks, the way they sounded, what they were wearing. And it happens, we all know it happens. So having somebody independent, or even somebody, like peer group review, where you've got somebody from a different team who's sitting in on those conversations and going, well, sorry, what I just heard you're talking about in terms of that person, isn't anything to do with their performance. It's about how they look, or it's about how they sound. That actually isn't the criteria. So having some independence and a bit of grit in there, I think, is quite key.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Kevin. There are a couple that have come through as well. Sarah asks about KPIs. So do you have any comments on what realistic KPIs might be for companies on socioeconomic diversity?
It's a really difficult one, because unless you know your starting point of the makeup and the configuration of your workforce, it wouldn't be sensible to set a target. So I'll be really clear, I would say do not set yourself a target until you've got your baseline. And then the first thing should be around disclosure rates, and setting yourself a target around disclosure rates based upon a highly engaging, very clear communication, as I said, about what you will and won't use data for. And then by all means, set yourself a stretching goal around improving. So when I was executive sponsor for diversity and inclusion at AXA, which was a role I held for 4 years, we didn't know our baseline when I first took it on. So I said, our first thing is going to be about data disclosure in our first year. The second year, we will then look to make progress and positive trends and positive movement in all of our metrics. And only at the point where we then had the data did we set ourselves a numerical goal. So, I don't want you to think it's wimping out, but it would be foolish indeed. Look at any of your other financial metrics as a business. There's no metric that you would set a goal without knowing your starting point. So just treat it as another business objective. Get to your starting point, then by all means have a plan that's going to help you achieve improvement.
Thank you. And one's come through just finally from Fiona as well. I think I'm just I'm asking if Fiona can ask. I'm not quite sure what she's getting at, but is there anything in particular that you'd recommend that financial services companies should build into their talent program to try and address this issue?
There's a couple of things. So as I say, I'm assuming talent program is mainly around internal progression. I think one of the things to be very aware of is, and this applies for women, it applies for people from an ethnic minority background and socioeconomic, there is massive imposter syndrome. And so it's often the case that talent programs and development programs are available, but people won't self-recognize that they're good enough for them. So if you do genuinely have very capable, talented people, you have to tell them that you think that they're capable and talented, and almost tap them on the shoulder to let them know that thing is there, and it's aimed at people like them. Because unfortunately, some of the people who are most worthy of it will be the people that have the least self-confidence to put themselves forward. And that's why sponsorship is really important, to have somebody who can take somebody aside and say, do you know what, that program over there, you could do that. And that's really important.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, and picked up on what you said earlier on as well about those people who perhaps aren't speaking up when people are talking about their university backgrounds, and I'm sure those, the conversations that happen on the golf course and things like that will probably, still happen, but it's about breaking down those. That's really interesting. Thank you so much for that, Tracy.
My pleasure.
And for sharing all that. And yes, as Tracy's mentioned, I'll make the slides available on our website later. So. Just for a moment, should we just take 5 minutes break, and then we'll carry on afterwards with Dro and Prince, if that's okay, everybody. So just we'll take 5 minutes, and I'll see you back at 1:45. Thank you again. Welcome back, everyone. Just to kind of reiterate the Progress Together, if you don't know if your organisation is a member or is involved, then you can check their website at progresstogether.co.uk, and you can find all the resources there. So please have a visit of that. And again, if your organisation isn't listed in there, then obviously you can start conversations with them to find out what they are doing, I guess, in this arena. So, but moving on, we now have Joe and Prince from the Nationwide, and so I'll just over to you guys, really.
Thank you, Nick. I just wanted to start by thanking Tracy. That was incredible. You packed a huge amount into such a short space of time. You've covered loads of the things that I had on my list to discuss as well, so which is great. Hopefully what we'll do is we'll just compound that learning in terms of our kind of experiences and kind of the things that we were going to cover today. Nationwide is a member of Progress Together, so we've benefited from lots of that really good stuff that Tracy's talked about in terms of the resources and the toolkits. Prince and I, we probably worked together for the last 18 months, and we were asked to kind of join you today, firstly to share our experience of working with Progress Together and the benefits that that's had for Nationwide, but also to try and bring it alive as well in terms of sharing our lived experiences. And I think Tracy's done a fantastic job already of covering all of that. And it was like you were holding up a mirror to me at some point, Tracy. Like, it felt there was so much there that just resonated with my own personal experience. So I am a senior leader within Nationwide. I have been here for 18 years, nearly 19 years, so it feels forever. It feels like I've completely grown up in this organisation. I've been here since I was 19, so my first job, really, first proper job. I've met my partner, I got married, I bought my first house, I've had my kids. So all of my big life events have really happened whilst I've been at Nationwide. My story started out very similar to Tracy. Council house, really, really rough, high crime rates, drugs, abuse. My mum was a single parent to 4 girls. She was in and out of abusive relationships. And that meant we were moving kind of around lots of different council estates and in and out of kind of refugees for women that were trying to escape abusive relationships. And because of that, my mum had significant health problems, mental health problems, and sadly died by suicide when I was 18. And again, we kind of had those caring responsibilities, the same as Tracy as young kids. But that meant from the age of 18, my mum, is the sole parent. So it meant from the age of 18, I had to be financially dependent. I was lucky enough to go to college, and I really didn't want to drop out of college. So I managed to stay there and work nights in a casino, doing bar work and kind of waiting. And then had the opportunity to start at Nationwide. And again, so many synergies that there was just somebody at Nationwide that saw something in me and really helped me to kind of build that self-belief and take risks and stop being invisible and really push beyond what I kind of was limiting myself to. But I'm not going to tell you too much about myself, because if you are a member of Progress Together, then actually we recently held a workshop with Progress Together on breaking barriers, and I shared more of my story there. So go and check out some of the resources through Progress Together. Today, I've asked Prince to come and join me as well, because as Tracy mentioned, there's a huge intersectionality with social mobility. And although social mobility is the prime indicator in terms of what's going to dictate somebody's success in their career and where they will end up, there is huge compounded impacts for gender and ethnicity, disability. And I think it's really important that we bring that to life. For me, I think as financial service organisations, if we are really, really going to crack diversity, which we are struggling with as an industry, if we are really, really going to crack it, then for me, social mobility is the golden thread that is going to help lift everybody up, because social mobility, social economic diversity isn't about just focusing on one characteristic. It really looks at kind of that widespread of kind of diversity. And diversity means so much, doesn't it? It's that richness of lived experiences. I think in terms of moving the dial, I think the FCA report this week around helping organisations to put more of a priority on this is really, really going to help. I was slightly disappointed that socio-economic diversity is going to be voluntary. But the fact that some of the diversity data will be mandatory is a really, really positive step forward to help us kind of move the dial here. And then obviously you've got consumer duty as well, which the aim of that is to make sure that we are better serving our consumers. And we can only really serve our consumers if we've got a diverse workforce that can really understand consumer needs and represent them fully. So for me, intersectionality and social mobility are the key to really achieving those things. And we have been working with Progress Together, and we will continue to work with Progress Together to help us on our journey. And we are relatively in our infancy on social mobility. So we started our journey probably around the same time that Progress Together launched. So sadly, we weren't a founding member, but we were one of the first to join when they launched. Through Progress Together, we've been collecting our data. We are not quite as good as Tracy's previous employer just yet. We are at 48%, but we are pushing to get to 67% as well, which is the point in which that data becomes really rich and meaningful in terms of being able to understand the makeup of your workforce. We have submitted that data to Progress Together for them to use in their recent report, which Tracy went through all of the findings, which for me, there's nothing surprising there, but it always shocks me to see some of the disadvantages that people from low socioeconomic face into, and the 25% slower to get into senior management role, and then 32% slower if you're from a low socioeconomic background and Black. Those stats can never leave me. They're just so powerful, and I think there's no evidence of talent, of ability that is stopping people progressing into senior leadership roles if they're from a low socioeconomic background. And I just think it's completely unacceptable that people from low socioeconomic backgrounds are facing those barriers through no fault of their own. So Prince, I will hand over to you. You're going to share a little bit about your story, and then we can come back and talk about kind of our next steps in terms of how we're going to work with Progress Together.
Superb. Thank you, Jo. Good morning, everyone. So my name's Prince, and I work in the Economic Crime Department at Nationwide, and I also work alongside Jo within the Social Mobility Network at Nationwide. So what I'll do is I'll share a little bit about my story to really bring intersectionality to life. So as a Black man from a low socioeconomic background, I'm affected by both the class and the race issues. So despite all my qualifications, my skills, and all my experience, I feel like I'm still not where I need to be. So I'll tell you a little bit more about my story. So I grew up in a one-bedroom shack in the townships of Zimbabwe in a place called Ngulumane, which is one of the most deprived places in Africa. To paint a picture for you, so growing up, really had no access to clean water, would go for days without food. You know, I was living in a really high crime and drug abuse area where unemployment was rife, and you had children on the streets who were not going to school. And at the time, I was living in a single parent household, having lost my father at an early age to a car accident. And this meant that for me, from a very, very young age, for me and my family, we struggled financially. But my mum got a lucky break to when she got a scholarship to study nursing in the United Kingdom. And then I came over to join her for, you know, better career opportunities. However, my mum couldn't afford to support me with my university studies. She was looking after my family in Zimbabwe, you know, a family of over 20, and she was sending them money to support them, to put, you know, food on the table and a roof over their heads. So I had to rely on personal loans, overdrafts, in addition to any little money that I earn working part-time while at college to, you know, to enable me to go to university. So by the time I got to university, I was already in a lot of debt, which meant that I couldn't afford my rent when I was at university. And this resulted in me being homeless while I was writing my master's in international law dissertation. At this point, I didn't really know where I would lay my head. You know, I was relying on food banks to survive. I didn't know where my next meal would come from, and I couldn't really see a way out. In this moment, what I did was, you know, I took perspective and reflected about, you know, where I'd come from, everything that I've been through. And, you know, this gave me the strength to carry on. I was resilient throughout and successfully graduated from a master's in international law degree at Sussex with a merit. I was determined to succeed, you know, despite my circumstances. I wasn't going to let this define me, because, you know, I knew that the opportunity to uplift myself was much bigger than me. This wasn't about me. This was about breaking the cycle of poverty that had plagued my family, and and about elevating the fortunes of a whole generation of my family. So for me, this has always been the source of my strength. Now, if we look at the fact that being from a lower socioeconomic background is strongly interlinked with race. Now, with that, it can bring significant disadvantages. So ethnically diverse men are 61% less likely to be in senior level positions than if they're from working class backgrounds. So despite my law degree, despite my master's in international law, despite receiving great feedback on my performance in the various roles I've held at Nationwide, performing out of my skin, doing everything that I can to move on up, despite the fact that I evolved Nationwide's brand value and I connected people on a common social purpose by launching an initiative that influenced over 7,000 colleagues within the branch network, hundreds of teams, including our CEO, board of directors, and the Nationwide leadership team, to commit to action under my inclusion, diversity, and well-being pledges. And despite the fact that I've worked in a number of different departments at Nationwide, from the branch network, financial crime, design, HR functions, and most recently, economic crime. And I've been mentored and sponsored by a number of senior leaders at Nationwide. Now, despite all of these factors, I've still not progressed upwards to a senior leadership position. Furthermore, the lack of a visual representation of people that have the same lived experiences of similar overlapping identities means that there's no positive and visible role models you can look up to, not only to inspire you, but to offer up opportunities for career advice, and guidance to kind of support you along your way in your career journey. Now, this combined with the bias that you receive as being a Black man, and the bias of being from a low socioeconomic background, can have a huge impact on job opportunities. So 45% of males in senior roles are white and from professional backgrounds, while 2% of males in similar positions are ethnically diverse and from working class background. Now, as someone who's affected by these biases, you're looking at barriers that are almost insurmountable to get through. However, I think there's a message of hope within all this. It's really important to change the narrative on social mobility in order to reframe the outcomes that come with being from a low socioeconomic background. These people, like me, who have had similar experiences to me, are not victims of their socioeconomic status, but actually they're champions of it. They are resilient. They are determined, because of the challenges and the experiences that they've had to overcome, the adversity they've had to overcome, and the obstacles they've had to overcome. However, I think it's equally important, as Tracy touched on earlier, that we get a better understanding of the inequalities that exist within our industry, in the financial services industry. And the first step to doing this is transparency, right? So as a sector, we need to research the socioeconomic background data of our people and start sharing widely, start publishing it, so we can really start to see where the issues and gaps are, talk about them, and then start taking actions to make some improvements and to create better outcomes for people's futures. And I know Tracy also touched on the class pay gap, right? It's so stark. It's absolutely shocking, because we are talking about people that are working in the same industries and not getting paid the same as their peers purely because of class. So clearly something's happening in organizations across the country, and people are not getting the same opportunities to progress, which is wrong. It's just wrong, right? these people have things to contribute and have the talent, but they're being held back. So it's all about bringing this darkness to life in a way that people say, I want to know more. I want to take action. I want to do something about it. And as a starting point, as a sector, we need organizations to set targets for their socio-economic background diversity, especially at senior levels. And don't just set those targets, actually start working towards them so we can make improvements and, start actively and proactively engaging with the teams within your organizations responsible for the executive search, and encourage them to compile diverse shortlists, but do so by socioeconomic background. Ensuring that the criteria for promotion and the promotion of opportunities as well is widely advertised is another step in the right direction. In addition to building, talent and leadership programs that are targeted to those that come from a low socioeconomic background, which includes those senior positions, to really, give them that inspiration and that stepping stone to progress within their careers. Thank you.
Thank you, Prince. That's really, I'm blown away by your story. It's always so inspiring, and thank you for being brave to share that, because I know it can sometimes be really difficult and challenging to be vulnerable, and it's, as you can tell from the way you share your story, you're incredibly passionate, and it is a very emotive subject. So just a couple of things that I just want to loop back round on in terms of the work that we do with Progress Together. So we've been using them we've been working with them for 12 months. We're really kind of tapping into the toolkits and the resources that are available. We know the key to all of this is data. Like Tracy said, build a business plan, get your data first. So we need to push to get our data up to 67% and then really crunch the numbers in terms of what is the data telling us, but overlaying that with lived experiences as well to make it really rich and meaningful. So how do we build our strategy out from what the data and the lived experiences are telling us? Focusing on progression and the kinks in the pipeline of progression, and then hopefully building some outreach programs as well to really make sure we've got diverse pipeline and we build that out strategically as well, looking at kind of skill gaps within the financial service industry as well. And then eventually, when the time is right and we have enough data, that we set some meaningful, ambitious stretching targets. Prince and I also, we lead our employee network for social mobility. So we set this up just over a year ago, which has brought together 800 colleagues across the organisation. And through that network, we really look to bring to life some of these lived experiences, sharing the stories of role models across the organisation, including senior leaders as well. And we also work with a life coach who comes in and holds some in-conversation with sessions, really to unpick some of the psychological barriers that people from low socio-economic background face. So imposter syndrome, kind of inner critic, how do you push yourself forward to push through some of those barriers and put yourself forward for opportunities when you might not have a sponsor and a mentorship. But what is also really, really important is that we don't always try and fix the person, because it's not necessarily always the person that needs fixing. Sometimes it's the processes that we have internally as well. So how do we make sure that our processes are inclusive and work for everybody? And that includes looking at kind of the development programs as well, and making sure you don't have a process and a program that you just put everyone on regardless of their background, because to flourish, you really need opportunities to be personalised to your individual needs. And I think when you're looking at mentoring people, you can't give the same mentoring and coaching to somebody that is a white male that has come from a privileged background to the same. You can't give the same advice to a young black female. You need to make, because their experiences are different, and how they then go on to react in certain scenarios will be different as well. So, for example, telling somebody to go and network with a senior leader you know, if you've got some common ground and you do go, you know, skiing in the same resort, or, you know, you both golf or whatever, it's easy to do that networking. When you don't have common ground, how do you build up that networking and that sponsorship as well? So I mean, we need to be really careful around some of our programs and making sure they are really tailored and suitable for people's backgrounds and personal circumstances. And we're really, really fortunate at Nationwide in that we do have really senior sponsors on this. You know, Debbie, our CEO, is a huge advocate of improving social mobility within financial services. And in terms of our employee network, we have Mandy Beach, who is the Director of Retail, and Jason Wright, who is the company secretary, sponsor the networks work as well. So we've got people at the right level that can really help us break down barriers and blockers where we face into them. So we are really, really proud members of Progress Together. We're on our journey still. We're at the start of our journey, but we've already, you know, really benefited from the value of that partnership. And perhaps through Tracy and Progress Together, we can work together to try and get the FCA to make social mobility declarations mandatory and not just voluntary. But Prince and I are super passionate about this, and there is positive hope. And although there are lots of disadvantages, and although there's lots of challenges, we are in a really good place to move the dial and make a positive impact, which will really, really go on to change people's lives. And I just don't think there's anything more important than that.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for really powerful stories there, and for being so open and honest. There's a few people saying, echoing that in the chat as well. So yeah, some really powerful stuff. And yeah, thank you for sharing. I just picking up on a couple of bits. I mean, it sounds like from what you've said, and I think what Tracy touched on as well, mentors and sponsors seem to be really important in this field. In as you say, giving someone to go to, as it were. Is that something that you're embedding throughout the organisation? And is it do you need kind of a range of mentors who from different backgrounds themselves?
So I'm going to be quite controversial. I think it is important, definitely sponsorships. I think it's really important to have the right mentor, a mentor that gets it and can give you the right advice, because I know that I've been mentored before and I've had poor advice where I've been told, don't be vulnerable, don't share that aspect of your life. And actually for me, my vulnerability has been the kind of the super strength, my superpower that's enabled me to progress and help other people, and then really elevated my career. So I think we need to make sure we're finding high quality mentors that understand what it is like to come from low socioeconomic backgrounds and can give really kind of rich advice. Sponsorships are really, really important, and I don't think they necessarily need to understand what it's like to come from a disadvantaged background, because they're more about lifting people up and helping them to open up opportunities and finding those doors that they might not necessarily have been able to have access to.
Thank you. And Tracy, did you have a comment on that or a question?
Yeah, I was just going to reinforce the point that Joe made, really. I think the worst kinds of mentoring programs are those where senior execs are told they have to do it, and they're matched with somebody through some HR process, and it's not really their thing, and they're not fully bought into it. And exactly as you say, there's no empathy, there's no ability to connect. Actually, they're just doing it to tick a box. They're the worst kinds of programs. So I would say mentoring is really important, but it has got to be on a sound footing, with a real commitment and desire to do it, not because execs have been matched with somebody and told they have to.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. Prince.
Yeah, just to build on what Tracy just touched on mentoring there, I think it's really important to actually, when you're in that mentorship relationship, to actually get to know the person like really deeply and start to understand their background, their experiences, you know, the challenges or barriers that they've faced, then you can be in a position to be better able to help them out in terms of giving them that career direction or guidance or opening up opportunities, rather than just focusing on the career aspect. Actually focus on the person and deepening that relationship, you know, making sure that there's trust, there's openness, and, you know, there's credibility in the relationship. Then you're both able to be as open as you can with each other about, you know, the things that you are struggling with in your career and things that you do need help with, because, you know, there's that trust, there's that safe space. So I think start with the person and then focus on how you can help them with their career. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Prince, actually, you said something when you were speaking, which I really liked, and I just wanted you, I guess, to expand, if you could, a bit more on how you think in Nationwide this is or isn't working. You said that rather than being a victim of a lower socioeconomic background, you're a champion of it because you're building resilience and all those characteristics that you get from you know, coming from that background. Is it something that that you're seeing a change in terms of, you know, the work that is being done, that's being recognized or not? I mean, you know, is there more of an emphasis on, well, you know, behaviors rather than skills, I guess, where I'm coming from there?
Yeah, so I think that the more people are vulnerable and are able to kind of share those stories about, you know, all the things that they've been through, then people can start to see that, you know, this person is determined, this person's resilient, this person can, you know, jump through hoops and get through many obstacles to kind of to progress and to do well, and they'll be a really valuable member of the team. So I think it's all about creating that open space for people to be able to share more, so that other people can start to view you know, those challenges and those experiences in a much more positive light as strengths, and then start to embrace them and, you know, be truly kind of proud of them and to help them with their careers.
Thank you. And Joe, I mean, just in terms of actual projects then that are taking place to look at this, do you have anything kind of tangible, something that you you know, someone here might be able to go away to their own organization and say, oh, this is what's happening over at Nationwide to try and improve you know, talent acquisition from different backgrounds?
So we've done a lot through the Social Mobility Network. So kind of this speed mentoring programs, like matching people effectively based on lived experience and what they want to give, sharing role models and lived experiences, working with the life coach to break down some of those psychological barriers. We've also done webcasts where we've had senior leaders. So we've had Mandy Beach really share her personal story. She comes from a council estate and has made it to Exco. So really kind of making those senior leaderships visible and sharing their kind of vulnerabilities in terms of their lived experiences. We are still at the beginning of our journey in terms of really understanding how we make a big difference here. We know that we need to. I've just been appointed into a dedicated social mobility role, which will lead the agenda. So, you know, my role will be to firstly understand the data and what that's telling us, and then start to build a plan around the data. I think there's loads of things that you can do before the data. You don't necessarily need to have the data to kind of start to make positive action, because, you know, if you help people from low social economic background with their development and their qualification, that's going to benefit them. But to really understand where the big barriers are and where the big kinks in that progression pipeline are, then we do need to kind of break down and say, well, where are our core issues here? Where are our stumbling blocks? What are we not doing well at? Where are the areas within Nationwide where we're failing? And then let's look to try and pick some of that and really put together a plan of action. So the main thing at the moment is data, getting ourselves from just under 50% to 67. If we can get it above 67, amazing. But then how do we work around that?
Yeah,
No, absolutely. I think data collection has always been a big thing in terms of diversity.
Financial services love data, don't they? So you know, let's leverage that and use that as a force to collect more data.
Tracy.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree. I think data is absolutely key. I do think that qualitative insight as well, though, is really important. Back to the point about lived experiences and how it feels to be in this organisation, being somebody like me. And if you have employee networks and you do therefore have people who are willing to declare, you know, sharing their data anonymously is one thing, declaring and being willing to talk about it, maybe in small focus groups about what they have felt the barriers are, is also really valuable alongside the data. And really understanding through your pipeline, you know, if you are gathering the data and you're able to match it with your hierarchy of your organization, you'll see where the breakages are, which will allow you to deep dive into, well, why is that? It's because we're setting some criteria for that next step up that isn't really necessary, right? Or because that talent development program that feeds those roles isn't reaching into these areas of the organization. So I think it's a mixture of qual and quant for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, the inclusion networks, I think, you know, have obviously been a big thing with a lot of our organizations recently, but I must admit, in terms of social mobility, a network there, I think that's less common than perhaps it should be. It sounds like, as you say, the thing that comes out of those, I think, really positively is that ability to be in a room with people from a similar thing and discuss and feel safe enough to discuss, okay, what does that mean for me and what does that mean in this space as well? So certainly think of people here don't know or know that they don't have social mobility networks in their organizations. It might be a conversation to have at least. Kevin, do you have anything to say or add?
Yeah, no questions have come through, but while you four have been talking, I've just been nodding away all the time, actually. So much agreement, and I suspect from the same. Prince, do have a look at the chat, because there's so many people really moved by your story, so thank you for that. I think, Nick, I'm also hitting a lot of things with you. Joe, I love the gold thread to lift us all up. A really nice comment. I'm going to probably steal that one if that's okay. Like you, Nick, Prince, your comment on champions of their economic status. I mean, boy, have I written that one down. And I just think that is it's a catalyst, that statement. So very important. The working with a life coach, I think that shows an organisation investing in those interest groups, and that isn't always present from my experience. So really liking that as a measure, actually, of progressing as an organisation. The advocates thing, we had a really good discussion there, and some bits I was disagreeing, some bits, and I think, Tracy, from your point there about how they need to work, then Prince, your reflection, I'm with you, Prince, that actually if you spend those first 2 mentoring sessions just building rapport and talking about yourselves, and it's important not to force it. I think people should be encouraged actually to walk away from mentoring where it isn't working. But where I've been involved in successful mentoring, it's where you find rapport no matter on the differences. Joe, with you, let's get those FCA declarations and nail them down. So anything we can do in IFS, let us know. Probably just a question as well, Joe, come back to you. The apprenticeship schemes, are they helping in the learning for people on a whole EDI basis, I suppose? But if we're using this as a golden thread to lift, definitely in terms of social mobility. Are the apprenticeship schemes doing enough, or have we lost something as we've gone to apprenticeship schemes? I'm not sure the measure of success for them.
Yeah, I don't think we look at it with an I&D lens, to be entirely honest, Kevin. I think apprenticeships could be much more valuable to us as financial services. I think you've got the apprenticeship levy, it's completely unutilised. I'm currently working with our early years team to understand if we potentially could look to offer out a closed cohort. I probably shouldn't be saying this. Can we launch a closed cohort apprenticeship to people that come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, so that we can start really like supporting people? I think they're there. I don't think people really know that they're there, and I don't think people really know how to benefit and utilise them the most. So I think, in short, I think we could do more with the apprenticeship schemes.
Yeah, no, I really like that idea. I think that's actually a way to get through some of the baggage that's around them. Yeah, the levy feels more like a tax than it does to support people's learning. Yeah, I'm going all the way back to my HNC again, Tracy. Sorry, I'm going to be there for the day, I think. Nick, that's it from me, but I just think we've had a great event. I'm still not seeing any more questions. I just think people are very content.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered quite a lot, and I, just listen to say thank you so much for everyone for your stories and for the comments that we've had. I mean, I think there's a lot there to mull on, and for people to take away about, perhaps breaking down those invisible barriers, about conversations about what, where you come from, and I think particularly in this sector there is some kind of feeling that you can't talk about your background if it's not of a particular one, for fear of it being used against you, or if you don't play golf or go skiing or whatever, that's somehow going to disadvantage you. But I think we've seen that actually that's not the case, and actually the more that we talk about these sorts of things, the more hopefully those barriers will break down. So Prince, Joe, Tracy, thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful. Everyone, the webinar has been recorded and will be available on the allianceforfinance.org website shortly, since I have time to edit it and upload it, along with any slides which were there. You will also receive an invitation very shortly to our next one, which is a very quick turnaround. It's in 3 weeks' time. The reason it's quite quick is we are coming up to Baby Loss Week, and we are doing a session with Aching Arms, who are a baby loss charity. So really good session on the 11th of October. So mark that in your diaries, and we will send out invites very, very shortly. But back to today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you again to the speakers, and we will see you again next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.